Hi, boys and girls. I'm so glad you could join me for today's Sparky story. I have my Bible in front of me, and our story is coming from the book of Ezekiel. Now, how many of you know where Ezekiel is found? Is it in the Old Testament or is it in the New Testament? If you said the Old Testament, you are correct. It comes after Lamentations, before the book of Daniel. Now, my question starting off is, how many of you know what a skeleton is? How many of you have ever seen a skeleton? Well, I have an old friend with me. His name is Mr. Bones. Mr. Bones lives at my house. We love Mr. Bones in our house. You see, Mr. David, my husband, spent his entire career as a radiologist looking at sick and broken bones. I have learned what a blessing it is to have strong bones, to be able to run really fast, to be able to kick a ball really hard and a long way, to be able to hug any of you, my favorite Awana kids, and to snuggle my grandchildren. God gave us these amazing bones. What if, as we were sitting here, the bones of Mr. Bones behind me started to rattle? Would that be just a little bit scary? Our story today is about someone in the Bible who saw skeletons come back alive. Now, let me give you a little backstory here. The people of God were the Israelites, and they were now prisoners. God had told them through Moses and then again through Joshua, obey me, obey my words, love me, and I will bless you beyond your wildest dreams. Disobey me, and bad things will happen. Sadly, I can tell you, they did not obey. So God sent King Nebuchadnezzar and his armies, who attacked the people of Jerusalem. He captured the city. He captured many of the people who lived there. He burned the temple with fire and stole all the gold and silver goblets and all the special vessels that the priests used to worship God. The Israelites were captives in chains. They were taken far, far, far away from the land that they loved. One of the captives that we're going to talk about today, his name is Ezekiel. No doubt you will remember another well-known captive's name, and that would have been Daniel. He too was carried away as a captive to Babylon, but in another group different from Ezekiel. The Bible tells us that Ezekiel was a prophet of God. Now let me ask you, what does a prophet do? They speak for God. God would give messages to Ezekiel, and he would tell the people what God wanted them to know. Even when the people were far, far away in Babylon, God gave Ezekiel messages, and he preached about God. One day, as Ezekiel was walking along a river, God came to him in a vision. It was a special kind of dream, not a sleep dream. This was a wide awake dream. In that vision, recorded in chapter 2, God spoke to Ezekiel, and God said, "Son of man, the people of Israel are stubborn and they refuse to listen to me. God continues to talk to Ezekiel. I have chosen you to be my prophet, to speak my words for me. Do not be afraid when they laugh at you, and do not be afraid when they threaten you. Speak my words to them. Well, I have to tell you this, boys and girls, it was a hard job for Ezekiel. The captives would not listen to him. He preached, he pleaded, he warned, but they didn't listen. No siree, Bob, they didn't listen. Some of them might have listened, but most ignored him. Some of them laughed at him, but most paid him no attention at all. The captives were sad. They were miserable. They didn't like being captives, and it looked to them like God had left them. Show me your sad face. The Israelites, the captives, were very sad. As the years passed, God continually spoke to Ezekiel many times, sometimes in sleep dreams, sometimes in visions. And then one day in chapter 37, this is recorded, God gave him another great vision. God took Ezekiel and set him in a valley of very dry bones. Everywhere he looked in this valley, he could see were heaps and piles of bones, dried up, disjointed, broken bones everywhere. Now that would have been spooky enough for me. But as Ezekiel looks carefully at these bones, he realizes they're not animal bones. These are people bones. On the ground were skulls and finger bones, were curved rib bones, long leg bones, tiny toe bones. It looked like they had been in the sun for a very long time. Dry bones everywhere. And then God asks Ezekiel. He says to Ezekiel, "Son of man, can these bones live? Can they come back to life?" What would you say if God asked you that question? Ezekiel wasn't sure, but he answered God, "Only you know, Lord." Then God said to them, "I'm going to bring them back to life. Speak to the bones. Tell them that, Ezekiel." Ezekiel obeyed the Lord and spoke to the valley of dry bones, and then he watched very carefully. At first he heard a little rustle, and then a louder rattle. And then he heard so much noise, so much clinking and clanking, he could barely hear himself think. And as he watched, bones began sorting themselves out. Finger bones attached to wrist bones attached to arm bones, and so on, and so on, and so on. Finally, the skeleton skulls were put on top, and the skeletons were finished. But wait, that's not all. As Ezekiel continued to watch, muscles came on the bones, and skin came on the bones, and a whole army of people looked at Ezekiel right there. God told Ezekiel, "Speak to the bones again, Ezekiel," and he did speak to the bones just as God told them. And the bones, the army of men that were not skeletons anymore, but were an army with flesh and skin, they began to breathe. And they stood to their feet, an exceedingly great army. And what God was telling Ezekiel and what God was telling his people that he loved so much that were captives in chains, that their hope is not lost. Although they've been scattered to another country, God is telling them, I did not abandon you. I am still here. I love you. And one day you will return to your land. And you know what? It happened just that way. Ezekiel 37. Can these bones live? Yes, they can. I love you. Bye.